This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.
Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson, and it's my pleasure to have with us again, once again, the famous Dr. Buck Melton. Welcome, Buck.
Always glad to be here.
There are lots of things we could talk about, but we're in the middle of the presidential season now, and there does seem to be a paucity of reasonable candidates.
Could it be?
Should
Folks, is he thinking about it?
I mean, if in fact this continues like this, I mean, maybe people might, such as myself, if I'm dragged into before the American people, maybe there's another choice.
You could be
out there.
the salvation of the country.
I'll leave everyone on baited hooks there as we await developments.
Well, we have made progress here
at
least.
Well, let's go through this. If you, it does appear. I mean, many people have said this. The political system, the two-party system, is just giving us two candidates that many people would say, well, I would never vote for that person. I would never vote for this person. And is the political system, our party system, is it giving American people the choice that would be reasonable? I mean, the process seems to be flawed. I think there's a fair statement there.
Yeah, I think the answer to that question is self-evident if you look at the two candidates that we have today. I mean, I think even the strongest supporters of both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have to admit that their candidates are severely flawed in one way or another. And this is probably the most extreme example of that in recent years, but it's except in degree, it's nothing new. I had posed a question to you just before we went on the air, and I've been asking this of people lately, and I'd like to ask our viewers, how many people do you know that personally acquainted, that you think would make an adequate president, reasonably intelligent, responsible, reasonably moral, and I can come up with dozens of people.
Sure, I made the comment. I mean, not totally facetiously, but half my Sunday school class would be great presidents. Maybe the whole Sunday school class, in case anyone's watching. But actually, many people we would say, well, are you an okay person? Yes. I mean, do you want to steal money? No, I don't think I want to steal money. Are you going to blow the world up? I don't think so. What kind of tough choice would you make if something happened in the middle of the night? Well, I'd get advice. I'd have somebody that knew what the deal was, and I would trust my advisors. And how do you pick your advisors? Well, you have to say almost many people could become president. But the question to ask is, what is the apparatus around these people that causes them to make good decisions? So
yes.
if someone from my Sunday school class is the president, okay, fine, and I'm sure they would really do what a nice person would do, an intelligent person, and it depends on the advisors. And how do we know about the advisors that each of these candidates have? I mean, that's a big question, isn't it?
Yes,
they can really be led astray with bad advice.
Yes, and that is a major problem with it, and a lot of times they've come under fire. The Ronald Reagan staff strictly limited access to him. The original idea of the best and brightest of the Kennedy and Johnson administrations, who led us into Vietnam. So that's certainly a major problem. But my point was essentially that if you compare the people who we are offered as presidential candidates with the people that we personally know that would make good presidents, there's a huge disparity there. That we are getting second-rate goods, and how do we fix that?
Well, it does. It's extremely troublesome. I mean, particularly the office of the president has such enormous power. I mean, I think the last several presidents, particularly President Obama, has expanded the power of the presidency. I mean, it's very, very powerful. The executive branch really, in many ways, overshadows other branches. Additionally, the president has the power to appoint federal judges, and the Supreme Court has a vacancy and maybe more vacancies coming up. So the next president is going to have a tremendous impact on America. And yet the process by which these candidates appear just seems to be substantially flawed.
Yes.
Now let me ask you this question. I mean, the Democratic Party seems to be, you know, with everything else being equal, I'd say, well, they want the voice of the people to be heard. They're against plutocrats. They don't like big business.
So they say.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
And so they'd like the ballot box to be really there, and they very resentful if there's any kind of impediment to voting. That's a big deal. Yet, in picking their candidate, they had these super delegates, so they abridged their whole idea. And having done that, maybe the Republicans did not do that. Maybe the Democrats knew something. Maybe there's a limit to the voice of the people in these political primaries.
Oh, I think the concept of the voice of the people among the leadership of the two parties is just a complete fraud. That the great division in our country today is not between Democrat and Republican. It's not between the modernist and the traditional, the social conservative. And I would say it's not even between the rich and the poor. It is between the power elites and those who have no power. And that is where the leadership of both parties have something in common. Look at Paul Ryan, for instance, who is one of the powerful leaders of the Republican Party.
It seems to be a reasonable person. I'll opine that.
Yes,
I mean, you got where I sit, it seems to be reasonable.
He would seem to be reasonable, but the Republicans handed the Republican Party a very solid victory in Congress in 2014. The Republican Party immediately proceeded to act as if it had lost the election, allowed the Democrats to proceed as if they had won the election. And when Donald Trump made his various comments about Hispanic judges and banning Muslims from coming into the country, whatever you think about that, Paul Ryan immediately said if Donald Trump becomes president, the Congress will sue him if he tries to ban Muslims. Paul Ryan has never said anything that strong of a president of the opposite party that is currently in Washington. So this is obviously not Democrat or Republican. It is someone who is a member of the powerful elite versus the outsider.
Well, I mean, we could make our conversation more complicated than it often is. You could say, is that just part of the human condition, that you always have some kind of elites or you have leaders?
Some animals are more equal than others.
Well, I mean, more than that. If you have like millions of people here, you have to have some kind of, I guess, authority to sort of make decisions. And often people can delegate authority to leaders. They say, well, I can't do everything, but I trust you. You're an okay person, and I know you look after my interests. But still, no matter what the circumstances are, it would be difficult to imagine where everyone just participated in making complicated decisions without knowledge. So, if I can return the conversation to what the American people are missing, there are several ways to go with this. One is, are they being well served by a two-party system, and the way the two-party system came up with these nominees? Were all the independents restricted? I mean, Winston Churchill said, the bottom of the beer has dregs, the top has froth, but the real solid middle people, the middle class people, are the people that really know what the deal is. And you could make the case the independent people really know what the deal is, and they're going to decide issues, and they're not, I would say, encouraged to vote. And many times, if they're not a party member, or they don't specify their affiliation, they can't vote. So these two candidates were picked with a really small electorate. Went through this process.
Yes, and they were probably chosen by electorates who tended to be not just self-selecting, but on the ends, because they had more incentive to get out and vote, as you were saying. I would say there are two types of independents out there. There is the true independent who really tries to think things through and does not follow a party line. And then there's the much larger group of independent who tends to lean very strongly Republican or very strongly Democrat. So I do think you need to distinguish between those two types of independence. But the true independent, yes, is marginalized by the party system. When I was a citizen of North Carolina, where they did not have open primaries as we have in Georgia, when you register to vote, they ask Republican or Democrat or Independent. And you have to declare yourself at that point, and it's very difficult to change thereafter. I mean, it can be done, but it's very difficult. And by declaring yourself, for instance, to be a Democrat, you cannot vote in a Republican primary. By declaring yourself to be an independent, you cannot vote in either a Democratic or a Republican primary, which is what you were talking about. And that's where a lot of the action takes place.
Well, just to go through this, it's true, each of the states, it's complicated. Firstly, these political parties, even though they play a tremendous role in American political life, that's the understatement, they're independent entities and they make their own rules, and I think the courts loath to interfere with those rules. And in the last electoral process, some states had particular ways they did it, and each state had their rules. And Donald Trump said, "Oh, this is terrible," or whatever. Although if it works in his advantage, okay, it's all right then. But the process is very Machiavellian and confused, and yet we only wind up with two people out of this process. And just to go through how those two people got there, I mean, you could say Hillary Clinton had an organization that she's been putting together for decades. I mean, the Democratic Party, all the people out there, and I think doing favors for people, giving speeches, helping political candidates. That's what people do, right? They come to your state and they want to be the potential president, and they support you as you run for Congress and whatever.
Yes.
So they've been decades of doing that, and a lot of money involved, and easy to raise money, and also the fact that there's a gender issue here. So, okay, I'm the gender candidate. Well, you could say that's kind of how that happened. And on the Republican side with Donald Trump, I mean, firstly, it's a person that sort of has firstly, access to publicity and the ability to obtain it. I think a normal person, I mean, it would be difficult to say the things he said and just be cool with it. I mean, it's water off my back when I make these inflammatory comments. That's cool, no problem. And he just got zillions of hours of free publicity, and he recognized, I think, very shrewdly that there's a constituency that we've spoken about earlier that has been neglected, both in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, and he spoke to that neglected group of people.
Yeah, so what you're getting at is, are these the sorts of avenues to power, to the presidency, to the most powerful office on earth, that we really ought to encourage or be satisfied with or be restricted to? And I think obviously when you put it that way, the answer is certainly no. There was a time when you could see the political parties, when you could see each political party as a means of compromise, of looking at a variety of candidates and interests within itself and coming up through a system of compromise with the best candidate. And then whoever won, the two parties would compromise with each other in the process of lawmaking and in the process of administering the government. And if you put it that way, it sort of follows Churchill's dictum that democracy is the worst form of government except all the other types that have been tried from time to time. But now the dysfunctional element is the parties do not work together, they do not compromise, they vilify each other. And therefore, I think it leads to extremism within the parties, and you see the more extreme candidates get nominated, and that means more extreme people get elected.
Well, yes, and there are lots of reasons for that. I mean, there'd be a whole litany of reasons the country is getting these tensions. But maybe one question to ask is, and I know you're an historian of repute, about the absence of third parties or four parties or five parties, and the situation that exists in Western Europe, which is we often say, well, if we just had things, we're the only country that has this or that. We're pretty much the only country that has a two-party system. I mean, there might be another country or two out there.
Well,
but,
most former British possessions actually are two-party systems. So, but
well,
not many others.
Maybe. I mean, even the UK these days has a number of parties, and certainly the Western European model to have numerous parties and they have a parliamentary system. But would the country be served better if we had additional candidates out there? I mean, it's so difficult to put a third party out there, and then both of the parties disparage that. Each party is very nervous that if some offshoot goes out there, the way the electoral process works, it would sabotage the whole arrangement.
Well, that's what I was talking about with the power elites, the powerful versus the non-powerful. That the one thing that the Republican leadership and the Democratic leadership have in common is that they wish to stifle the emergence of any large third party, be it the Tea Party or Trumpism or Bernie Sanders socialism, you name it. That's something.
Well, were that to happen, it would be axiomatic that that party would be defeated in national elections and probably in most local elections too. The vote would be split. I mean,
well, perhaps not. I mean, there'd certainly be major realignments. But if you look at England once again, how about 100 years ago, Labour came out of nowhere to overtake the Liberal Party and become one of the two major parties and eclipse the Liberal Party. So perhaps that will happen in our future. I think it's less likely because you've simply got the inertia of sheer size. These parties consist of millions of people and hundreds of millions of dollars.
How many people are actually on the payroll of the respective parties? You know, I get a check from the Republican Party or I get a check from the Democrat. It can't be so many. I mean,
it can't be so many, but then when I say millions, I'm talking about people who would really not even dream of voting for the other party. And there's a sizable, in a country of 300 million people, I think there's a sizable number that would fit both into each category. So that gives it an inertia, and it gives each party a degree of political and economic power that's very hard to shake.
Now, you know, we made the comment about, well, we could pick someone from Sunday school class to be president, on and on, but there are some encumbrances that occur. And each of the parties put a platform together. So this is supposedly, if you vote for the particular candidate, these are the things that are supposed to happen. And a lot of this is, it's an interesting process, in that right now the respective parties are putting their platforms together, and it's fair enough to say the winners of each respective party are getting some blowback about what's going to be on the platform, what's going to happen. I think Bernie Sanders is saying, I want the platform to have a lot more leftist ideology than routine, and people are saying to Donald Trump, well, we want to, I don't know what you wish, Mr. Trump, but we want these core Republican values in our platform. And then the question is, how much does it matter what's in the platform, or is this all just smoke and mirrors? Does it matter at all?
I vote for smoke and mirrors, and I'll test you. And you may not be a typical person, but I'll certainly direct this to the viewer. No, it's. But can you tell me something that was in the Democratic platform of 2012? Something specific, or the Republican platform of 2008?
How about statehood for D.C.? I'll throw that out.
Well,
Did I get something?
I don't know.
That's generally in there. If there's something out they generally put in.
Well, yes, and that's the point I'm trying to make, that I think we all know the mainstream that you know, the Democrats will have in the platform: don't touch entitlements, don't touch abortion.
Maybe minimum wage, something like that.
So there's nothing innovative in the platforms. We already know what they have to say. We don't read them, and the platforms are free to be ignored by the president once he, or in this case she, is elected. So, yes, smoke and mirrors.
Yes. Well, all right. Is it important for respective voters to we talked about advisors. So Donald Trump says, well, I'm just going to depend on advisors, and I'll pick the best advisors. And I don't really have any independent opinions right now, but I'll have the world's best advisors, and I'm a real tough guy, and you can depend on me to look after your interests. And maybe Hillary Clinton might say, well, I know the game, I'm wise enough And I don't really need any advisors, or except my husband Bill will be there to run the American economy. But so really, for both candidates, it's unknowable who would they put up there. Would it be reasonable to say, these are going to be the people I intend to be national echelon guys, and these are going to be the people that are going to give me appropriate advice, and they're experts in the field, and who are they? Just to understanding that, I might be useful. I
think it would be very, very useful. I would modify your statement one way, and then a personal anecdote, that an early question to Donald Trump about foreign policy, who would you turn to, Mr. Trump, to advise you on foreign policy? Trump's reply was, well, first of all, myself, because I'm a bright person. And then these brilliant people, the best and the brightest, once again, the same sort of best and brightest who got us into Vietnam. George Bundy, for instance, who was a brilliant individual,
sure.
But that didn't avert the crisis of Vietnam. A personal anecdote from my father, who was mayor from 1975 to 1979 here in Macon. And he liked to tell this story, and it's one that I greatly remembered. His first day on the job as mayor, he called in all his department heads, and he said, I'm going to lay down the law here, and I want to make one thing perfectly clear to all of you. I need you a lot more than you need me.
Yes.
So, which is not what they were expecting hearing, but
right.
It's very true. And Franklin Roosevelt knew this. To put the right people in the right jobs. He saw himself as a traffic cop, directing people where they needed to go. That was his great strength.
Well, maybe this is the question the American people should know. Who are the people that are going to pick my advisors? What system do I have to put advisors in there? Who are going to be the people that give me advice?
Yes.
And I would appear, at least from the Hillary, their side of things, they're loyalists that have been with her for a long time. And you can imagine, I think the public at least has some idea of the kind of people that would be choosing her advisors. And many times these positions are political payoffs.
Yes.
Of one type or another. So another thing the American people should be aware of is the advisors are often in there as sort of honorary positions, but they're put there, they raise money, they gave money, they're a long-time constituent, or what. So often the whole apparatus is not what a really squared away, let's say, major general would pick for his staff, or a corporate executive, or a person of that ilk. The political impact is out there on getting advice.
Well, politics is always the answer, and I think that most of these advisors are going to be in there either for what they have done for the incoming president, or for what they can do for the incoming president. What interest group do they represent? What past payments do they represent? So you have to look into that. You have to consider that as a
well. Here's another question to ask for the respective political candidates. What kind of debts do you have that you're going to have to pay off after you're in office? What are those debts?
Well, you can certainly ask that.
Well, but you could ask it. You would not get a straight answer. Is there a problem? Another thing that's debts in the sense of political debts or economic debts, or you name it. And so a person that has fewer debts presumably would be a more neutral president. And maybe you could say, being neutral on the subject, Donald Trump has done this, he doesn't owe anybody much, and I think he makes that point. So maybe he would be slightly more independent.
Well, I think that's part of the attraction. So, but
on the other hand, it's a big job. And when you become president, if you're elected president, they're just, there's 6 weeks or less than 2 months, some figure like that, to get around then, 20th, whatever, maybe a little over 2 months. A little over 2 months, you get everything straight. I'm going to run the world. It seems an impossible task during that 2 months to put things in place, and just about impossible. And it makes one nervous, does it not? Is there?
It does, and in Trump's case also, the Bush Republicans, who have really been running the Republican Party since the late 1980s, early 1990s, they are not devoted Trump people. So the top members of the think tanks, the top academics, the top intellectuals, they're going to take, I imagine they're all going to take themselves out of the running, or even if they don't, I'm not sure if Trump would want to have anything to do with them. So that's going to, if he should win the presidency, make things, the dance even more complicated in his case. Whereas I'm sure Hillary has a huge long list that's already in place.
All right, Bucky, you're a smart guy, so I'm going to challenge you with these questions. What advice would you give to the respective candidates, right? You're going to be their advisor. The election is out there. We'll start with an easy one. That's Donald Trump. What advice would you give him?
Now, are you asking me what advice I'd give him to get elected? Or
I think so. Advice to get elected, and then, you know, your policy is, you know, how can you be elected? Let's do that.
Well, for Donald Trump, I would say, assuming that Bernie Sanders is going to pull Hillary left, I'm going to advise Trump to, first of all, move to the center. And right now, don't wait until you're inaugurated or elected. Get yourself a good economic advisor who can explain things to you very clearly, a good legal advisor, constitutional advisor who can explain things to you very clearly, and a good foreign policy advisor and a good military advisor. Because I think that you've got a lot of self-education to do over the next few months, and that will increase exponentially if you should get elected.
So the question to ask here is, with Donald Trump's good qualities, and I'll give him some, with guarded giving, I would phrase it that way. It must be something good. But taking advice might not be one of those things. So is that a hopeless task? If a person says, I do it my way or the highway, I'm not going to take advice, the fact that he would not take advice, and we've discussed how your Sunday school person, a normal human, would have to take advice.
Yes.
You would have to take advice. And if right now in the middle of the campaign you're showing that I don't take advice, that's a shaky situation. So one of the I guess important things about being president is a person that can take advice and consider the advice and make the right decision, but you have to get some opinions.
Well, and to quote that famous politician, Dirty Harry, a man's got to know his limitations, and that taking advice, the knowledge that that you don't know everything, I think is one of the first qualifications to be president.
Okay, now we have Hillary there. I mean, what advice would you give her? You were going to have make some comments about that.
I have no idea.
Would she take advice?
I think that Hillary has been there so long that in a different way from Donald Trump, she's got all the answers. She has had her sights set on this for so long. She knows exactly what she wants to do, and is not going to change anything. So, with Donald Trump, it's a matter of ignorance, and with Hillary Clinton, it's a matter of tunnel vision.
Well, what I guess you'd say is the political calculus. I mean, the Clintons are master political mathematicians. I mean, so if you ask, what would you do to get elected? She's and her team, I'm sure, has figured it out. I mean, well, let's put there are all kinds of people hovering around saying, well, smile more, don't smile as much, tell jokes, don't tell jokes. We looked at the numbers in upstate, I don't know, Minnesota.
The focus
we're going to what are we going to do in upstate? It's a crucial doubt. You have to call these people. So presumably, she's the pro from Dover right now. In the ring, it's a boxing match between a person that won't take advice and a person that's just riddled with it. And when the two meet, is Donald Trump the kind of adversary that's outside your sphere of knowledge or reason? Since you're getting advice, it's kind of like I don't know, fighting a conventional war.
Yes, he's a street fighter.
I know exactly how to fight a conventional war, and on the other side you have this person that is like a guerrilla, so to speak. I mean, a warlike, using the term in the military fashion, is a person that would be sneaking around in the woods at night, and Hillary might have big tanks there. Still, having said all that, it does look like the American people are not going to get what they deserve.
Well, perhaps
assuming they deserve something pretty good.
Well, perhaps we're going to get what we deserve, because this state of affairs has only come about because we have allowed it to in the last 50 years. So what we need, that's another issue.
Well, thank you so much for our conversation
sir.
tonight. We'll talk some more about this. Well, that's bad.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.